maybe it was when you were 5 going to the lake for the very first time. Or maybe when you were 4 and you lost your first tooth and the tooth fairy came to visit you. Well, for children overseas, their earliest memory was in a smelly sweatshop filled with sickness and disease. Children ages 10 to even 3 years old can start working as soon as they start talking and walking. Would you want that for your child? In this speech, I will persuade you to think more in depth about the clothing that you are purchasing. First, I will talk about the conditions of a sweatshop. Second, I will talk about slave-free companies that we can look into. And third, I will talk about the ethics of clothing and any questions that come with abolishing this modern slavery. I am credible to give this speech because I have done extensive research with many articles and authors who have first-hand experience in this field. First, I will go in depth on the conditions of a sweatshop. In an article titled Sweatshop Subjectivity and the Politics of Definition and Exhibition by Daniel Bender, he quotes a sweatshop as a workplace that violates more than one federal or state labor law. And America has some of these sweatshops by that definition, but none to the extent that they are in overseas countries. Inspectors looking in the 19th century during immigrant New York, quote, the stench would almost force you down the stairs. It would almost make you sick. Decaying vegetables, filth, dirt, animal feces, and a little bit of everything. These conditions describe the New York shops before the sweatshop labor laws and the current situation that is going on overseas in countries that don't have any of these laws. Another quote by Bender says, workers cited their weak bodies as evidence of the exploitative nature of the shop. And it wasn't just physical, but women's sexual abuse and objectification that was going on. An article titled Stitched Up, the Anti-Capitalist Book of Fashion quotes, the investigation found that the all-female workforce, mostly migrant from South Asia, had undergone beatings, forced labor, and systematic sexual abuse and rape. Would you want to work there? What about someone like your sister, or your mom, or your niece, or your future daughter? By purchasing goods from these companies, we promote the continuation of these conditions. All of these women are someone's daughter or niece. These are women that are waiting to get picked up and trafficked so that they can make their income for the day. This is something similar to what's going on in these sweatshops. And these are the pictures that are on the endslavery.org website that I'll talk about more later. And this is a mother who's looking for her daughter who was trafficked in a brothel. And she's walking around the country asking if anyone knows where she is. But like I said, these women are all someone's daughter or niece or mother, and we need to put ourselves in those shoes, and how would we feel if we were in that situation? So what can we do? Now I will tell you about the companies that are safe from slavery. And buying clothes without child labor and slavery is very hard. One side, you have very expensive clothing sourced organically from ethical companies, and then on the other side you have companies like Shein who have $4 crop tops that you can easily buy. One resource I found was a website called endslaverynow.org. An article titled Cleaning Up Fast Fashion quotes slavery as, the Anti-Slavery International defines modern slavery as the severe exploitation of other people for personal or commercial gain. And that's the definition of slavery I'll be using in this speech. This website has many resources. You have Learn, Connect, and Act. Under Learn, you can learn about modern slavery, find photos and activism and slave stories and how they escaped. Under Connect, you can find ways to reach out to end slavery, and Act is where you can find ways to help the movement. Under Act, we find a list of companies that are slave-free. They include accessories, baby accessories, outdoor, bath and body, clothing, coffee, drink, electronic, food, home, jewelry, and shoes. To get on this list, you must fill out an application. And some of these companies that have filled out these applications and have been screened as slave-free are Patagonia, Lush, and Ben & Jerry's. Some other resources that we can use are thrift stores. There are 2 thrift stores in Litchfield that carry clothing. Again and Again and Threads of Hope. They are both located downtown. Money that goes to the thrift store promotes the continuation of these good environmental stores that stop the continuation of these bad stores. And by buying clothes from the thrift store, you can even find name brand items that don't directly go to that brand, but you can still have the trend, or you can still have the influence that those brands have on the culture. Now I'll talk about the ethics of clothing and some questions commonly asked and associated with its abolition. These are real students and consumers who have asked these questions. Waist Couture quotes, "Prices so low consumers consider clothing disposable. Some call it fast fashion, which is the equivalent to fast food." Now this fast fashion, like this top from Shein, it breeds consumerism. And America already has very, very low mental health rates, and by continuing this consumerism and the materialistic fulfillment that we get from purchasing clothes, we are continuing the bad health and mental health in America. So, we have to look at the ethics of it. Is it ethical to buy a $4 top from Shein by a little child who is making it, or is it more ethical to spend a little bit more money and buy a top that is organically sourced? A quote from the article, "Child labor is a national problem," says, "It is fundamentally wrong. It is a contradiction of the basic principles of this free republic we are built upon." In that very same article, she quotes, "The demand for such labor as children can perform increases often with the progress of machinery and mechanical devices made for small bodies, and it calls for reformation." Now, we as people need to realize that these children are the sole income earners of their household. And what we can do to stop that is to reform the machinery that these children are working in. And now it puts the change in the hands of the younger generation. What will we do? In this speech, I've talked through the conditions, I've talked about slave-free companies, and I've talked about the ethics of slavery. I hope that I have persuaded you to a slave-free clothing future. Small steps in the right direction are leaps away from the wrong direction. Change does not come from one person, but it comes from the people who are willing to fight. It comes from people who are willing to take the harder road to pave a path for those who come behind them. And it comes from you, and it comes from me, it comes from our family and friends. So, to join change, one step at a time, we need to do it together. Thank you for listening to my speech, and these are some sources that I use.